Hello everybody, welcome into another Talking Fitchburg update. Today I'm joined by the Fire Chief of the Fitchburg Fire Rescue, Joe Pulvermacher. Joe, how have you been doing out there, sir?
Doing well. How are you guys doing in the studio or outside of the studio?
Well, Joe, as you can tell, I'm at the Crosby household today, and very appropriately, I'm in front of the fireplace. That's electric fireplace, so no creosote or anything like that here. Still need to get a check, though, by the professionals. But that's not why you're here, Joe. You're here to talk about understanding outside fires. We're just going to go across the board here. First and foremost, just set this up. We have COVID-19, the pandemic out there right now, and DNR had put out a statewide ban on burning. But that's, I think, where the confusion starts to get in.
Yeah, so let's just talk a little bit about what we typically do in Fitchburg. Typically in Fitchburg, we offer burning permits for those that are burning their yard waste, natural combustibles, and they typically take care of this stuff at the beginning of the summer or in the spring and then in the fall. But that said, we do have some specific guidelines as far as what's allowable. Now, typically, we allow burning permits in the urban service area as long as conditions permit. But early in the COVID situation with shelter at home, the DNR had placed a burning ban on permits, or they suspended burning permits, which created a lot of questions locally. What we did as a city is we went along with the DNR's guidance and also suspended burning permits. In order to better appreciate some of the things that are allowed and not allowed, you have to understand where burning permits are issued. So we already talked a little bit about that as far as the yard waste and so forth. And then we started getting calls about people who had the manufactured fire pits or fire pits in their yard. And typically anything, according to ordinance, any fire that's intended for personal warmth or cooking does not require a burn permit, which means that you can go ahead and light a fire in your yard for basically entertainment or cooking value. But here's where I hesitate, because of the fact that it doesn't necessarily give the resident carte blanche as far as being able to start a fire whenever they want. One of the things that everybody needs to appreciate is the fact that once you start a fire, you own it, and anything that happens as a result of that fire. If we have complaints about the smoke coming into a neighbor's yard, or more specifically into their house, we may have to come and address the control or extinguishment of that fire. Additionally, sometimes weather conditions just aren't right. So a high wind, for example, can create significant problems with fire spread if people are lighting fires when it's really not safe to do so. And then another situation where we would want to control the fire is when we're under high or extreme fire considerations through the DNR or the U.S. Fire Service or Forest Service. One thing that we want to be conscientious of is when the conditions are dry, it really doesn't matter if you have a permit or not, have a permitted fire or not. These fires can contribute to an overall fire hazard that could create problems in our neighborhood. So whenever we have high or extreme fire risk through the DNR, we tell people to not start fires. We highly recommend that they not start fires. That brings me back to my earlier statement, and that was, if you go against our recommendations, you own that fire and anything that happens as a result of it. So that gives you some indication as far as some of the things that are of concern and some of the questions that we've received here at the fire department.
overall, Joe, what are some of the factors that cause the fire danger to go up, and why is it? Seems like it's really in the springtime that we really hear about outside fires being a problem, but why is that?
Yeah, the DNR and the U.S. Forest Service take a couple of things into consideration. One of them is the overall humidity in the air and on the ground. A lot of it is dry foliage that had basically died, decayed over the course of the winter, and now is dry, and it contributes quite readily to the growth of fire. And then the other thing could be just your other general weather conditions. Some of the precipitation that's happened recently, along with the winds, and how those contribute to the overall fire spread. You put all of those things together, and you get a pretty good indication as far as whether fires are going to grow rapidly or whether they're going to be easy to manage.
Yeah, that's what makes it so scary right now. And there's been a couple of large fires in Juneau County. Had a significant one, at least closer to home here. But if people see people burning leaves, things in their yard at this time, again, what would you recommend they do in any fire situation? If you even have a doubt, like, this doesn't seem right, what would you recommend folks do?
So the first thing that I recommend is try to be a good neighbor, right? And I get that there are sometimes relationships between neighbors that aren't conducive to a direct approach, but the direct approach is the best option initially, so that everybody can basically be on notice for their neighborhoods. Not only that, but it's good relationship building, so that somebody isn't receiving a visit from the police or fire department as a result of something that they're doing on their private property. Now, if that relationship doesn't exist and people are concerned, any fire activity is an emergency. So if there is concern about smoke or fire, one can dial 911. You can also dial our non-emergency number. The thing that's important to note about our non-emergency number is our stations are staffed when they can be, but we can have firefighters out on calls. Could be during the weekend, to the point where administration isn't staffed. As much as we'd love to be able to staff 24 hours a day, budget-wise, it's just not an option right now. So what we try to do is try to have call forwarding wherever possible. But at the end of the day, if it's involving a fire and you're concerned about where the smoke is going, or if there's the potential of fire spread, dialing 911 will get somebody to your house so that we can address it. If it's within regulation, we won't necessarily extinguish right away. But if it is a nuisance, and if it is something that creates problems, either from a fire perspective or a health perspective, we will ask for the fire to be extinguished, or we will provide that method of extinguishment.
Yeah, I think understandable in that case that would happen. Going back to people specifically burning or having a campfire, there's so many different camp fire setups. You've got the portable ones that you can buy in the store that has a cover on it. If I guess for those people who are thinking of still about having some type of campfire, do you have any safety tips there that you would recommend if you're going to choose to do that?
Yeah, there's a couple of them. First of all, know your neighborhood. We have a number of different neighborhoods, especially with smart growth and smart code. The homes are just pretty close together. And having a fire in between two closely spaced structures is never a good idea. So from that perspective, understand how much room you have. What I like to see in the recommendations that I provide generally are about 50 feet from any freestanding structure. understanding that not everybody has that amount of room, but the more space you put between the structure and the fire, the less problems you will have with things like convection and conduction, and then just your direct contact through embers or flames themselves. So the more space you put between the fire and the structure, the better.
If you do have one of those portable campfire place things, would you prefer that they do it in the grass and their drive? And again, given the space that you just talked about, it's going to be tough, or on their deck.
So, understanding this is sort of like the common sense approach, where on a deck, especially if it's wood, never a good idea, especially if something gets underneath the deck. It could create a really good fire environment that then becomes a lot larger and not easy to manage. In the grass is a decision that people make often, but there are some issues with grass dying as a result of its exposure to heat. Sometimes, well, if this is something that the homeowner plans on doing regularly, I would highly recommend a sand base or something underneath the fire pit. But once again, it should be close enough to the point where, or far enough away to the point where it's not a problem, but also close enough so that it has a means of extinguishment. There needs to be something close by. I mean, it could be something as simple as something popping outside of the fire pit, or hopefully this never happens, but somebody tripping, injuries, falling into the fire pit. That method of extinguishment will also serve as the first means of patient care with cooling an injury. So fire is a tool that adults use to provide warmth and some degree of function with cooking. We've got to be very careful and monitor those situations, especially when we have our families around. Yeah. So from that perspective, I think we look at best practices, and distance is our friend, and a means of extinguishment is also very helpful.
Joe, thank you so much for the time. If people do have any additional questions, your folks are out there and ready to answer those calls. Where can they call into?
They can call the non-emergency number here at the fire station, 608-270-7070. And then also one thing that they'll want to pay particular attention to is the urban service area that we have in the city of Fitchburg. Those maps are available on the city's website. But basically, if you have an area that you live in that has a hydrant, typically that's in the urban service area. It's suggesting that population density there's more population per square mile, and those are the types of things where we are not issuing the burn permits to those neighborhoods just because of smoke conditions and the potential for fire spread. So know your area, know your neighborhood. And then one other question that I've received has to do with propane fire pits. Those are probably the easiest to control and maintain. Probably one of the options that are available in smart growth or smart code communities. But once again, within reason and know your environment. We know that vinyl siding does not react very well to heat. So even having your grill too close to your home with vinyl siding has initiated a call to the fire department to assist with putting out exterior fires. Just a couple more options to consider as you look at the overall safety of having outside fires.
Funny you mentioned that. The previous owners here had their grill too close, and I can see exactly where that melted that area. So definitely, yeah, it doesn't, not at all. Joe, thank you so much for your time as always. We'll be touching base with you soon here, and stay safe out there, and tell everybody to stay safe out there from us here at Fact TV.
I will. You stay safe too.
You betcha, I certainly will. That's Joe Pulvermacher, your fire chief here in the city of Fitchburg. And check out our website, fitchburgwi.gov, Public Safety, Fitchburg Fire Department, to get all the details that you need out there.